Hold on to your hats because in just 20 seconds, you'll dive headfirst into the very best of the Wild West channel. 90 jaw-dropping minutes of showdowns, Wild West legends, and stunts that have racked up over 10 million views worldwide. Saddle up, legends. Adventure starts right now.
The unforgotten witty last words from the outlaws of Old West. Well, Billy the Kid got one of the most short-lived, colorful life as an outlaw, which ended when he was only 21, as he got shot in the dark by Garrett. However, we also have Cherokee Bill, who was pushed into his death on gallows when he was just 20. Still, he was the outlaw who got to have the wittiest last words even before death. You're curious, right? So am I. Then let's find out the reason at the end of this video. But before that, let's hear the last words of the first outlaw on our list, Billy the Kid. Let's begin with the legendary and unforgettable outlaw that the lawman Pat Garrett kept an eye on. Kid was a skilled gunslinger who had gunned down 21 men at the young age of 21. He was the leader of the notorious Rustlers gang, who became an endless headache for cattle ranchers in New Mexico. Despite that, he was known by the townspeople for being humble and polite, but his enemies knew him as a deadly outlaw. However, his colorful life as an outlaw ended early. Before Garrett gunned him down in the Fort Summer, he said, "I'm not afraid to die like a man fighting, but I would not like to be killed like a dog unarmed." Thomas Black Jack Ketchum was infamous for his robberies and crimes. Alongside his gang members, they committed several crimes, and their latest attempt was their last. When Ketchum's gang tried to rob a train, he was shot by the conductor in the arm, knocking him off his horse. The next morning, he was found by the authorities beside the tracks, badly wounded. His arm was amputated, and while waiting for his trial, he was nursed back to health. Later on, he was sentenced to execution by hanging. His last words were, "Can't you hurry this up a bit? I hear they eat dinner in Hades at 12 sharp, and I don't aim to be late." Sam Bass was a notorious robber who mainly specialized in robbing stagecoaches and trains. With the mayhem they continued to spread, he and his gang became under Pinkerton's and the Texas Rangers' radar. That's why their last bank robbery failed when the authorities ambushed them, since one of his gang members actually betrayed them, as the person became an informant of the Texas Rangers captain John B. Jones. During the shootout, Bass was fatally wounded, and just before he succumbed to death, he uttered these words, "Let me go! The world is bobbing around me." Augustine Chacon. This fellow is very popular, and despite being an outlaw, he was still widely liked by many citizens. Well, maybe due to his Robin Hood-like personality, he had gained a huge crowd cheering for him. But Chacon was still a deadly outlaw who had killed 30 men in his outlaw career. That's why the Arizona Rangers captain, Burden C. Mossman, disguised as an outlaw and colluded with one of Chacon's gang members to betray him in exchange for a pardon and cash. Eventually, Chacon was arrested and was sentenced to death by hanging. And before he was hanged, he shook his followers' hands and bid them goodbye. With a smile, he uttered, "Too late now. Time to hang. Adios todos, amigos." Tom Horn. Well, he really had a variety of occupations, for he was an outlaw, scout, lawman, and even a notorious gun for hire. The number of men who fell under his hands as a hired gun was approximately 17. Also, he was known for being a sharpshooter who could hit his unsuspecting target from 200 yards away. However, later on, he was executed by hanging for allegedly killing a sheep rancher's 14-year-old child. His last words were, "Killing men is my specialty. I look at it as a business proposition, and I think I have a corner on the market." Wild Bill Longley. His story as an outlaw had all started when he accidentally killed his father's slave. Together with his cousin, Longley fled to southern Texas, where they spent the entire year doing all sorts of hideous crimes. He later disguised himself as a sharecropper, then ambushed and killed his childhood friend, Wilson Anderson, whom Longley's family blamed for a relative's death. However, the law caught up with him soon, and after his arrest, he was tried and was sentenced to be executed by hanging. Shortly before his death, many believe that he might have experienced a change of heart since he uttered these last words: "I deserve this fate. It is a debt I owe for my wild, reckless life. When it is paid, it will be all over. May God forgive me." James Brown Miller, or Deacon Jim, has earned his uncanny reputation as the deadliest outlaw and one of the most feared psychos of his time. Despite being a notorious hired gun and criminal, he continued his facade as a very religious and respectable minister. Well, at least on the outside. Thus they nicknamed him Deacon. Behind the scenes, he was a terrible person who would kill anyone as long as the price was right. And during his heyday, several lawyers with land claim cases, locals with existing feuds with some big associations, would just mysteriously disappear. He had a sophisticated way of dealing with his job and always managed to evade getting caught. But eventually his facade ended, and he was finally caught after failing for the first time in cleaning all the loose ends. When the mob heard the news, fearing that Miller would escape again, they forcibly hanged him together with his conspirators. Before dying, he said, "Let the record show I've killed 51 men. Let her rip." Henry Starr. He might be one of the prime examples of having his aspiration being deeply inspired by his family. Since Henry was a descendant of one of the West legendary outlaws, the infamous Belle Starr, aka the Queen of the Outlaws, he might be considered as the man who robbed more banks alone than anyone else in America, as he was on a hot trail with the law. Sadly, Henry's luck soon would run out, and he was captured by the authorities. Surprisingly, he was then released from prison after being paroled for his good conduct. However, he was only able to maintain that when he was inside. So, upon his release, he immediately returned to robbing banks. Later on, his series of successful heists was ended with a failure, and he was shot in the back. His last words were, "I love it. It is wild with adventure." Calamity Jane. Who would not remember the woman who made a name for herself with her calamity-like presence? It was believed that she was about as ill-behaved as any male outlaw during her time. She was quite notorious for being a heavy drinker, her fiery temper, and was fond of wearing men's clothing. Despite that, she was well remembered also as a selfless person for nursing the sick people without worry of getting infected herself when smallpox hit Deadwood, South Dakota. Later on, she would meet a sad and miserable end as her alcoholism fully took over her life. And shortly before her death, she said, "Leave me alone and let me go to hell on my own route." Levi Boone Helm. Unlike everyone else, this person was oddly infamous as the Kentucky Cannibal. Despite this, Helm started normal, just like a typical frontier person. Well, aside from being too violent, he was even confined inside an asylum. But shortly, he managed to escape and continued his notoriety as a serial killer and cannibal. It was only after teaming up with the notorious Henry Plummer's gang that he was again captured. During the trial, Helm even kissed a Bible and then accused his close friend and fellow gang member of crimes he had committed. Of course, that didn't work, and they were sentenced to be hanged in front of a huge crowd of 6,000. After seeing his friend hanged, Helm uttered, "Kick away, old fellow! My turn next! I'll be in hell with you in a minute!" Tom O. Folliard was orphaned only when he was 14 years old. After his parents died in smallpox, he came to Fort Summer just to pursue his idol Billy the Kid. He wanted to see him in person and, of course, become a member of his gang, the Regulators. When he met Kid for the first time, he tried joining, yet he was rejected. But eventually, he was welcomed into the gang. Tom soon became a good gunslinger, then after some time became one of Billy's closest and trusted friends. However, an incident happened when their gang tried to make their escape while being pursued by Garrett's posse. Tom was left and was shot by Garrett. Just a few moments before he died, Tom said, "Oh my God, is it possible I must die? The sooner, the better. I will be out of pain." Crawford Goldsby, aka Cherokee Bill, was definitely a deadly outlaw, notoriously known for killing 8 men, which the first one happened when he was only 12. During his teens, he became deeply involved with the Cook Gang and started his rough and tumble life as an outlaw. These fellows mainly operated at the Indian Territory, where their infamy spread unhindered. From banks, stores, and trains, regardless of what establishments, they did all sorts of robberies for more than 2 years. Definitely, with extreme luck, they often managed to slip away from the authorities and even successfully evaded posses. However, it's quite a bit odd and incomprehensible that Cherokee Bill tried robbing a train alone. It was that time that one of his former gang members led the authorities to his arrest in exchange for a lighter sentence and bounty money. Eventually, he was then sentenced to be hanged in front of hundreds of people. Just before his last moments, an official asked him of his last few words, if he happened to have one. Well, while seemingly unconcerned, Cherokee Bill then hastily replied, "I came here to die, not to make a speech." You have just discovered the amazing witty last words from Old West Outlaws. So click this and discover another amazing Old West wisdom that might help you even today.
Johnny Ringo, the Wild West Enigma. Did you know that legendary figures like Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp, and the James Younger Gang all crossed paths with him? Johnny Ringo was even related to the James Younger brothers and, at one point, was rivals with Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. His incredible adventures, both exciting and tragic, are the stuff of legends, and by the end of this story, you'll learn more about the mystery behind his strange death. Let's dive in and see how it all began. His story started on May 3, 1850, when he was born in Indiana as the oldest child in his family. Back in those days, life was really hard, and families often had to move around to find food and safety. Over time, Johnny's family grew from 3 to 7 members. So, his parents, along with Johnny and his siblings, packed up and traveled across the country. This marked the beginning of Johnny's adventurous, sometimes rough life. By the time he was 14, people noticed his sharp eyes and quick reflexes, though no one guessed that he would grow up to be a famous sharpshooter. Sadly, tragedy struck when Johnny's father accidentally fired his gun while cleaning it, leading to a terrible accident. Despite this, Johnny's family didn't give up. They continued their journey and eventually stayed with their cousins, the younger brothers. When Johnny was older, some people said he was a troublemaker who liked to drink and caused problems, while others believed he worked as a farmer. What's certain is that his reputation as an outlaw began when he got in trouble for firing a gun in public. He later became involved in a feud known as the Hoodoo War, fighting to defend his friends after they were tricked and attacked by a gambler. Johnny's life was full of wild moments. He had run-ins with the law, arguments with townsfolk, and even close calls with legendary lawmen like Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Some saw him as a poetic, charming figure, while others thought of him as dangerous and unpredictable. He spent a lot of time in saloons and even once shot someone who refused a drink he offered. Johnny Ringo wasn't just a gunslinger, he had a surprising poetic side. Folks said he could quote Shakespeare like a true gentleman, which earned him a strange mix of admiration and fear. But don't let the poetry fool you, Johnny was as dangerous as they come. He ran with the Clanton Gang, known for stealing cattle, robbing stagecoaches, and stirring up all kinds of trouble in Tombstone, Arizona. Now, here's where the story really heats up. Johnny Ringo's path collided with two of the Wild West's most iconic figures, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. These two legends had already made their mark in frontier lore, and adding Johnny Ringo to the mix was like tossing dynamite onto an open fire. The trio's encounters in Tombstone became the stuff of legend, fueling tales that still captivate Western enthusiasts today. One of the most famous rumors involves a near duel between Ringo and Holliday on the dusty streets of Tombstone. Ringo, known for his sharp tongue and fearless attitude, reportedly exchanged heated words with Holliday, whose deadly skill with a pistol was matched only by his razor-sharp wit. The tension between them was palpable, drawing a crowd that braced for an epic showdown. Both men were infamous for their tempers and their ability to back up their threats with gunfire. However, before either could draw their weapons, the law stepped in. A town constable, perhaps realizing the chaos that would erupt if these two titans clashed, managed to defuse the situation by arresting them both for carrying guns within city limits. The moment passed, but the idea of what could have happened still lingers in the imaginations of Wild West fans. Had Ringo and Holliday faced off, it might have been one of the most legendary gunfights in history, a duel that, sadly for some, never came to be. Ringo's quick wit and fiery personality ensured he made plenty of enemies during his time in Tombstone. Yet, those same qualities also added to his allure. He wasn't just another outlaw with a quick draw, he was a man whose intelligence and charisma set him apart, even among the larger-than-life characters of the Wild West. His ability to match wits with someone as sharp and dangerous as Doc Holliday elevated him to near-mythical status, ensuring his name would be remembered alongside those of the Earps, Clantons, and other legendary figures of the time. Johnny Ringo's life ended in a way as wild and mysterious as the man himself. On a hot summer day in 1882, his lifeless body was discovered slumped under a sprawling oak tree in a remote part of Arizona. A gunshot wound to the head seemed to tell a clear story, and authorities quickly ruled his death a suicide. But was it really? That's where the mystery begins, and the answers become as tangled as the roots of that old oak. From the start, the details didn't quite add up. Witnesses who found Ringo's body noticed strange clues that suggested there was more to the story. His boots, oddly enough, weren't on his feet. They were tied to the saddle of his horse, which had wandered off and was found 2 miles away. Who takes off their boots in the wilderness, let alone ties them to a horse, just before taking their own life? And then there were the signs of a struggle. Some accounts claimed his scalp had a knife wound, as if he had been in a fight before his death. Others said his face bore scratches and bruises. If this was truly a suicide, why would there be physical evidence suggesting he had been attacked? The more investigators pieced together the scene, the murkier it became. Theories began swirling faster than a desert dust storm. Was it a rival seeking revenge? Johnny had made more than a few enemies in his time, from gamblers to lawmen to former friends who turned against him. Could it have been a hired gun sent by one of those powerful adversaries? Or was it an ambush by someone looking to settle a long-standing score? There was even speculation that Wyatt Earp or Doc Holliday might have been involved, as both had crossed paths with Ringo in the heated days of Tombstone's turmoil. Adding to the intrigue, rumors hinted that Ringo had grown deeply depressed in his final days, drinking heavily and lamenting his fall from grace. Some believed he had finally succumbed to the weight of his troubled past. Yet, others dismissed the suicide theory outright, arguing that Ringo was too proud, too defiant to end his own life in such a way. He was a man who faced danger head-on, not someone who would run from it, even if that danger was himself. To this day, the questions linger. Did Johnny Ringo truly pull the trigger, overwhelmed by despair? Or was his death the result of a carefully orchestrated plot, carried out by unseen hands in the dead of night? The lack of witnesses and conflicting evidence has left historians and Wild West enthusiasts debating the truth for over a century. What we know for certain is that Johnny Ringo's final chapter only added to his legendary mystique. His death remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Old West, a fitting end for a man whose life was defined by danger, rebellion, and the unrelenting allure of the unknown. Like the oak tree that shaded his final moments, the story of Johnny Ringo stands rooted in history, but its branches stretch into the realm of legend and unanswered questions. One of the newest and most controversial theories about Johnny Ringo's death suggests that his demise was not the result of a suicide, a rival's revenge, or even a Pinkerton operation, but a carefully orchestrated hit by the US government. This theory posits that Ringo, with his connections to cross-border smuggling and the outlaw networks of the time, became entangled in activities that posed a threat to federal interests, particularly in the volatile region near the Mexican border. Supporters of this theory argue that Ringo's rumored involvement in illegal arms trading and cattle smuggling could have made him a target for covert government action. The late 19th century was a time of significant unrest along the border, with tensions rising between the US and Mexico over lawlessness and banditry. Some historians speculate that federal authorities, frustrated by the inability of local lawmen to contain figures like Ringo, may have resorted to using secretive and unofficial means to eliminate high-profile threats. It's time now to watch this incredible video. We animated Wild West outlaws and their untold stories. If you're fascinated by daring outlaws, epic rivalries, and the secrets of the untamed frontier, this is a journey you can't miss. Trust us, you've never seen the Wild West brought to life like this before. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more thrilling tales from history's most exciting era. See you there.
Most extraordinary photos of the Old West. Have you ever wondered what frontier people do during the Old West era? Well, not to surprise you. Aside from mingling in the saloons, tending the cattle herd, look at these guys as they just actually captured a wolf. So the cowboys do this often to protect their livestock from getting attacked by wild beasts. And we've got a lot more Old West photos like this. Moreover, at the end of this video, you will discover an extraordinary photo that really captured how most frontiermen dealt with the rough and tumble life in the Old West. Then, without further ado, let's begin. Rufus Buck Gang. So right on the bat, we've got these infamous outlaw teens that perhaps never in your wildest dreams you would assume had committed some of the grimmest crimes in the Indian Territory. But don't get fooled by their innocent looks. As with the lead of Rufus, abused and ravaged women and kids. And worse, they often did their crimes while the family members of the victims were forced to watch. With all that brutality, as soon as these fellows got caught, they were hastily hanged on the gallows. Rose of Cimarron. Unlike her breathtaking look, this gorgeous frontier woman had a tragic story and also a particular hobby. Well, she had a short career as an outlaw, and she actually fell in love with one. It's just that with a twist of fate, his brothers, who were known as bounty hunters, were the very same people who gave her love story a bitter end, as they killed her lover for the bounty. Los Diablos Tejanos. Just with their name alone, most outlaws would shake in terror, as they were not called the Texan Devils for nothing. Yes, they were mostly underpaid, but they were thorough in implementing the law and always ruthless against outlaws. Serpent Charmers. Most frontier people were fond of sideshows and carnivals. Even Buffalo Bill became famous for owning and showcasing his very own show, the Wild West Shows. And this photo showed one amazing performance that they enjoyed before. This charmer handles boas, rattlers, cobras, or all sorts of snakes, showing how they can make a wild beast benign. After a long walk, Navajo tribe spotted elk. Sadly, when the wagon started moving to the west, they brought along the settlers, who began expanding westward. This led to skirmishes with natives, such as the Navajo tribe, who got forced to walk away from their ancestral lands. This photo captured the trauma of the Navajo leaders during the Long Walk of Navajo. Not long after that, some natives, like the Lakota, took weapons, which even led to a confrontation with the federal government. This became known as the Wounded Knee Massacre, where around 250 Lakota men, women, and children were killed, including the Lakota Sioux chief, Spotted Elk. Undoubtedly, life was really hard on the frontier, both for settlers and natives. Although some would perhaps say that the latter experienced way more hardships, still both fell victim to diseases, lack of food, lawlessness, and selfish schemes. However, despite all that, these enduring frontier people made ways to deal with the already hard life. And that's evident in this photo. Cowboy dance. In a way, it brought these people together, relieving some of their accumulated fatigue with their unending work? Well, of course, it's fun and it's free. You've discovered an extraordinary Old West photo collection. So now click this and discover Top 5 Wild West Gunslingers animated by AI. Wisdom of the Old West that would save you even today. How hard was life in the Old West that they must keep this wisdom in mind all the time to stay alive? At the end of this video, you will discover the wisdom that made the Old West people become legendary individuals. So check it out and keep it in mind. Without further ado, here's the first wisdom you must know. Always be thankful for the food on the table. As in the Wild West, it was really hard to find food that was edible and not poisonous. Most of the people before would either be dying in hunger, eating poisonous plants, or inedible meat. In that sense, you will be thankful that your hunger will satiate and not die early. The only substitute for good manners is fast reflexes. The Old West was full of notorious men who were always looking for trouble. That was why, if you cannot talk to them carefully and wisely, you better have the fastest means of defending yourself when they point a pistol towards you. Never name your cow if you plan to eat it. This may be sweet as it sounds to call and name your animals, but in the Wild West, naming them was a bad idea. It would only bring sadness as they were reserved for food, and we may not live long with them since livestock was limited and could also be stolen. Remember that silence is sometimes the best answer. The people of the Wild West loved asking silly questions to lure you into misfortune. So, if a man arrives and interrogates you right away, without any possible reason, don't answer. Because whether you know it or not, your answer will be used against you. Do not hire someone you drink with. It was common judgment in the Wild West to not hire someone you drink with, because that might cause a huge problem. They say one glass was fine, but more than that creates a mess, especially when you wake up and see him in your workplace. If you find yourself in a hole, the first thing to do is to stop digging. When you find yourself in trouble in the Old West, you must think of the most possible means to get away with it. It was either you ask for someone's help or stop being a jerk for a while, so they can spare you for the rest of your life. Always forgive. In the time of the Wild West, where there were a lot of outlaws, surely you should not look for enemies that might hunt you down for revenge. You should also forgive as it brings you peace of mind. Speak your mind, but ride a fast horse. In the Old West, if you ever want to say or do something offensive, you should know the possible consequences and the fastest way to run away with it, since the town people would never hesitate to chase you out and kill you for your grave mistakes. Always check your back. Survival was the most common thing people thought in Wild West. Since resources were very limited during that time, people always fell into the thought of taking advantage of others. Don't worry, it still happens up to this day, so keep this in mind. Never approach a bull from the front, a horse from the rear, or a fool from any direction. It meant in the Wild West, there was no room for mistakes. So, it was better not to approach someone foolish enough to cause trouble, since they would never bring good upon you. Never miss a chance to shut up. Believe it or not, saying nothing in the Wild West was the best option you had. You can always choose to be silent, then get your whole family murdered. You may think it has not happened these days with social media, but it has. Never slap a man who's chewing tobacco. In the Old West, most of the citizens who chew tobacco were considered to be dangerous or high-ranking individuals. So, you better never get in trouble with them, since they could be either a fearsome outlaw or a ruthless lawman. Do not bother with other people's business. This wisdom always saved their lives in the Wild West, especially not involving themselves with outlaws. Same goes with now that people may choose to be a bystander, since we are afraid to be involved that we might cause our end. The best sermons were lived, not preached. People at that time believed that wisdom couldn't be taught unless you've been doing it already. In short, you must set the example first before telling them what to do. Never fight someone more powerful than you. Living in the Wild West was not as secure as it was. Even with the best lawmen around, giving the powerful people a hard time was a bad idea. For them, you are a needle in a haystack that can be easily thrown and can never be found. Every man is entitled to scratch his own itch. In the Old West, they believe that man is always the one accountable for their actions. That is why, if you end up being in trouble, it's your job to get yourself out of it. After all, never expect anyone to do the fixing for you. Don't squat with your spurs on. Simply means do not do something stupid. Like when you tried to kneel with spurs, only to hurt yourself. Life in the Wild West was dangerous and unpredictable. Therefore, do not do something stupid that will get you in trouble or get yourself hurt. You can't unsay a cruel thing. At that time, you should always be mindful of your words, because once it goes out, there will be no way of taking it back. And once the people did not like what you said, you better pack up and leave the town immediately before terrible things happen to you. You don't learn much when everything goes right. The Old West was centered in a culture that anchors to a belief that if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning at all. Despite being so mean, they believe that failure is the mother of success. Success is the size of the hole a man leaves when he dies. In the Wild West culture, many believe that accomplishments were not determined by how someone lived, but instead by the legacy they left after they breathed their last. You have discovered the famous Old West wisdom that could save us even today. So click this and discover the famous last words from Old West Outlaw.
You, me, and Old West. 5 extraordinary facts revealed. Old West, Far West, or the Frontier are the popular terms for historical events that took place between the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century during the expansion of the border of the United States of America towards the coast of the Pacific Ocean. Stories of people of various conditions who undertook the adventure to the west with the hope of achieving personal success, but who ended up, not infrequently, faced with justice or the doom of destiny. In this video, we will see their less friendly and familiar face. We will discover secrets that have remained hidden for many years, and you will know facts and realities that have been prohibited in the official history books. In addition, and with the help of artificial intelligence, we will recreate some of their most iconic photos, giving them movement and special effects like you've never seen before. You will enjoy these troubled characters as if they were alive in front of your eyes. Let's start with this exciting story about the Old West. Thank you for watching. We hope you liked this video. Your opinion is very important to us. Please leave your point of view on this video with a comment or a thumbs up. Thank you.
Most legendary robbers of the Old West. Have you heard that the Daltons were mostly well-established lawmen before they turned into outlaws? They were once on the side of justice, but for a reason, they all went to the other side as some sort of robbers. At the end of this video, you will discover the shocking reason behind that. But first, let us show you the legendary robbers that made it into our list. Jesse James and James' younger gang. Their adventures started after they all met in the Civil War. Well, they were cousins anyway. One of their most notable robberies was the Rock Island train robbery. While the train passengers were seated comfortably, they were disturbed by a commotion during their ride. The train they were riding was derailed abruptly by the suspicious group of men wearing masks, the James Younger Gang. It was well known that these folks had a rule of never robbing or harming passengers that they deemed innocent and harmless. So, they proceeded to the cash safe instead. The heist was a big success, and they earned a fortune of $55,000 in cash. After that, the gang continued their legend and even made another successful bank robbery that got them a whopping $62,000. So with their confidence inflated, they have done something silly and attempted to rob a bank while heavily drunk. Definitely things turned sour, and this failed robbery marked the end of their fame. Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch was the most successful gang in the Old West when it came to train robberies. Their legend was made during the Wilcox train robbery. It was seemingly a quiet pre-midnight until a group of masked outlaws halted the Pacific train at Wilcox, Wyoming. Then, unabatedly, they declared their intention of robbery. There would be a high return with high risk, so Cassidy caused a massive explosion just to open the cash safe. The Wild Bunch got it big this time and earned $50,000 in this heist. And with Cassidy's lead, they established wealth and infamy with several successful robberies. However, at the same time, they became the focus of a massive manhunt, which later on would cause the gang to disband and go into hiding. Billy the Kid and the Rustlers Gang. With the legendary Deadly Outlaw as their leader, this group of rustlers and horse thieves spread their notoriety near the Mexican border. They became the consistent headache of cattle associations and big ranches, as they leech off a portion of their supposed income in every livestock stolen. It was also believed that they were deeply involved in money counterfeiting. But to make things worse, these guys were experts in escaping prison. However, things would not always remain the same, and it was until Pat Garrett led a posse that killed most of their members, while Billy the Kid met his tragic end as he was shot dead in the dark by Garrett himself. Ike Clanton and Cochise Cowboys. Ike came from the infamous Clanton family that owned one of the biggest ranches in Arizona. But it was believed that their cattle were mostly rustled and robbed from the Mexican borders by their very own gang, the Cochise Cowboys. They were also notoriously known for being ruthless and frequent troublemakers. And aside from being local thugs, they were also deeply involved in stagecoach robberies, teamster ambushes, and even murders. They had remained unchallenged in Tombstone, Arizona until they met their makers, the Earp brothers.
Before continuing, we would really appreciate a like to this video. If you also want to see similar content in the future, consider subscribing and activating the notification bell.
Bert Alvord and the Alvards Gang. Their legend started when a person with a bad reputation, Alvord, was hired by a sheriff but turned to an outlaw, then committed a robbery instead. It was a sunny day, while Downing tended the horse in the vicinity. The other gang members stopped the train using explosives before it got to the Cochise station. This signaled the start of their plans. They took their guns and pointed to the faces of the train's crewmen, and they got near the cash safe uninterrupted. Eventually, they made a huge profit of money and jewelry. The news about their successful heist immediately reached many people and brought them a hot pursuit behind their tracks. Still, they managed to stash away the goods with another stroke of luck and escape with their pockets full. The Hole-in-the-Wall Gang. As simple as it might sound, it was actually a large organized gang of outlaws made up of several separate gangs of the Old West. Yes, it sounds like a huge syndicate during that time. They were all mainly gathered in the Hole-in-the-Wall Pass, using it as their main base of operations. The gangs formed an alliance, where at times, some members of one gang would ride along with other gangs. Of course, they chose this hideout for its terrain advantages when it comes to evading the authorities, since it was very hard for lawmen to get undetected when trying to scout the place. It was well built, where each gang had a corral, livery stable, and even numerous cabins. Well, in order to maintain their alliance, they had rules of never stealing from another gang's supplies and should provide themselves with their own food, livestock, and horses. The affiliated gang that made them a legend was the infamous Wild Bunch, which used the place for hiding during the harsh Wyoming winters. Bob Dalton and the Dalton Gang. Well, their life as an outlaw began after Bob and his brother Emmett were relieved from their positions as lawmen when they were found selling alcohol. However, they soon got acquitted but did not pursue being a lawman again, and instead, they headed to New Mexico. There they established their gang and committed their first robbery in a gambling house. But the event that brought the Dalton Gang the start of their fame was the Alila train robbery. At that time, they chose the same train that their idol, the Wild Bunch, robbed. Right away, they pointed their guns at the passengers so they could rob them uninterrupted. However, they only got spare change, so their only hope was to open and loot the cash-filled baggage car. It was then that the train operator chanced for an escape but was noticed and was shot instead. Eventually, they found what they were looking for, looting $17,000 in cash, then escaped unharmed. However, you will be surprised that another reason motivated this heist. Despite living a wealthy life as a successful rancher, Bill's anger and dispute with the train corporation pushed him to choose their train to rob. Also, it was believed that these fellows sought the thrill and personal achievements as their main goal, more than the wealth and fortune they could get during these robberies. You have just discovered an amazing story about Old West's most legendary robbers. So click this and discover another amazing story about the legendary Old West sheriffs brought to life by AI.
Let's chat about Butch Cassidy, born Robert Leroy Parker, the most courteous criminal who ever tipped his hat while cleaning out a bank. This guy was so non-violent, you'd think he was allergic to bloodshed. Despite being a full-time outlaw, there's no record of him killing anyone. He planned his heists like a mastermind, always aiming to avoid any shootouts. If there was an award for nicest guy to ever rob you, Butch would win hands down. The thank you note bandit. After one bank robbery, instead of just skedaddling, Butch left a handwritten note thanking the bank staff for their cooperation. He even added, "You might want to invest in a better safe." Imagine being the bank manager reading that, robbed and critiqued in one fell swoop. Deja vu on the rails. Butch had the audacity to rob the same train twice. The second time, the fed-up conductor exclaimed, "You again?" Butch just grinned and said, "Well, you make it so darn convenient." It's like he had a punch card. Rob 5 trains, get the 6th free. Billy the Kid, the outlaw who could steal your cattle and your heart, in 2 languages. Let's talk about Billy the Kid, born Henry McCarty, also known as William H. Bonney, a legend who was as quick with his wit as he was with a 6-shooter. Growing up in the melting pot of New Mexico, young Billy didn't just pick up Spanish. He became so fluent that he could charm you in 2 languages before you realized your wallet was missing. He seamlessly blended into Hispanic communities, often using Spanish aliases. If there were a Wild West award for most likely to confuse a bounty hunter, Billy would have been a shoo-in. Poker Face, multilingual edition. Picture this: a dimly lit saloon, smoke hanging thick in the air, and a high-stakes poker game underway. Billy notices that his opponents are exchanging sly glances, clearly up to no good. Without missing a beat, he switches to fluent Spanish, rattling off bets and raises. The other players start fidgeting. "Hey, what's with the Spanish?" one grumbles. Billy flashes a mischievous grin. "No comprenden? Now you know how I feel when you fellas cheat." The table erupts in laughter, except for the cheaters, who are too busy turning red. Billy scoops up the pot while they're still trying to translate. Jesse James, the outlaw who faked his death and other shenanigans. Let's dive into the wild and wacky world of Jesse James, the original rock star of outlaws who could rob a bank, charm a crowd, and still find time to prank the entire nation. Before he became a legend with a price on his head, Jesse was knee-deep in the Civil War chaos, riding with Quantrill's raiders. These guys were the guerrilla fighters your mother warned you about, notorious for their hit-and-run tactics against Union forces. Jesse got his first taste of the outlaw life there, but little did anyone know just how creative he'd get. Hilarious hijinks and amusing anecdotes. We don't rob our own, but maybe wear a name tag next time. So picture this: Jesse and his gang storm into a bank, guns drawn, everyone hitting the deck. As they're collecting cash faster than a Black Friday sale, Jesse spots a familiar face among the terrified customers. Turns out, the guy's a fellow Confederate veteran who's fallen on hard times. In a rare moment of outlaw empathy, Jesse hands the man his money back. "We don't rob our own," he says with a wink. The startled customer clutches his cash like it's a winning lottery ticket and blurts out, "Next time, wear a sign or something. My heart can't handle these surprises." Jesse just chuckles and saunters out, leaving everyone wondering if they just got robbed or made a new friend. The dead man writing letters. Tired of being the most wanted man west of the Mississippi, Jesse decides to have a little fun. He pens a letter to a local newspaper declaring, drumroll please, his own death. The news spreads faster than gossip in a small town. People hold memorials, write tearful obituaries, and some probably start thinking about renaming the local saloon in his honor. But lo and behold, a few weeks later, Jesse pops back up like a bad penny. Folks don't know whether to be relieved, scared, or just plain annoyed. One exasperated editor quips, "Dead men don't write letters, but they sure do sell newspapers." Jesse probably had a good laugh over his morning coffee, thinking he'd missed his calling as a publicist. James Butler Wild Bill Hickok, a lawman, gambler, and the kind of guy who could shoot the ace out of your hand from across the room. This man was a living legend, known for his sharpshooting skills, flamboyant style, and a mustache that could make a cowboy weep with envy. But even legends have their off days, and Wild Bill had a couple that are the stuff of Wild West lore. The unluckiest hand in poker history. Picture this. Wild Bill strolls into a Deadwood saloon, ready for a friendly game of poker. He's dealt a pair of aces and a pair of eights, not too shabby. Little did he know, this hand would soon be dubbed the dead man's hand. Earlier that day, a friend cautioned him, "Bill, one of these days, gambling's gonna be the death of you." Wild Bill chuckled. Only if Lady Luck's feeling particularly unladylike. Well, turns out she was in a downright foul mood. A disgruntled drifter named Jack McCall took that moment to shoot him in the back. Talk about a bad beat. From then on, aces and eights became the hand nobody wanted, unless they had a hankering for the afterlife. Never sit with your back to the door, except that one time. Wild Bill was notorious for never sitting with his back to the door. He was so cautious that he'd make other patrons swap seats so he could keep an eye on who was coming and going. People thought he was just being paranoid, but he'd say, "I can't shoot straight if I can't see straight." The one time he broke his own rule, he joked, "Well, let's hope no one has a grudge today." Spoiler alert, someone did. Maybe he should have stuck to his guns, literally and figuratively. Poker face legend. Bill's poker face was so stoic that even a statue would have looked animated next to him. A newbie gambler tried to throw him off by making funny faces and telling bad jokes. Wild Bill didn't even blink. "Son," he drawled, "I've faced down stampeding buffalo and angry outlaws. Your knock-knock jokes ain't gonna cut it." The great mustache mishap. In a poker game gone awry, Bill lost a bet and had to shave off his iconic mustache. The next day, crime rates spiked because no one recognized him as the sheriff. Frustrated, he drew on a fake mustache until his real one grew back. "Can't have lawlessness just 'cause my upper lip's on vacation," he grumbled.
Best photographs of beauties of the Old West brothel. Although dime novels say that the Old West was mostly dominated by men, contrary to that, the very first establishment that prospectors, travelers, and frontiermen would go to besides the saloon was the brothel. Well, the beauties at that time captivated them, and we'll see some of the best photos that captured their alluring charm. Also, at the end of this video, you'll discover the extraordinary story of an opera singer that transformed herself into a red light district superstar. So without further ado, let's get started. Well, during those days, the women of the frontier actually had no legal rights to own properties. And worst, they had very few opportunities for employment. So to provide a roof over their heads, the only preferable option was to work in a brothel. It's just that their story would not end up just like that. Just like this tall and breathtaking beauty, Madam Jenny Rogers. During her heyday, she was known as the Queen of the Colorado Underworld. Yes, aside from her charming looks, she also got influence, money, properties, and quite of a solid reputation. However, not everyone would end up like that. Most of the brothel ladies would stay working throughout their prime under fancy bordellos owned by reputable madams. It really takes more than hard work to reach that level of success. But despite that, these women earned more money in a day compared to others who worked for weeks. That's why in this photo in a boomtown in Colorado, you'll see these beauties hanging out just in every place of this famous brothel house. Speaking of success, did you know that many experts believe that these brothel beauties contributed a lot to developing the frontier? Well, aside from offering extra service, these ladies also took the role of a wife and cared for their patrons to the extent that they made sure that they ate regularly and even kept them tidy. No wonder these prospectors kept on visiting brothels. And who would forget Madame Pearl de Vere? She was notable for providing her brothel ladies with regular medical checkups, exquisite clothing, and high wage. But more importantly, this made her brothel more famous to wealthier patrons. And guess what? With her beauty, for her clientele to spend a night with her, they were willing to pay $250, which was around $6,500 today. Well, that's why it's not unheard of that some of these beauties were the biggest earners and the most influential person in their town. And just imagine how a well-known opera singer, Emma Lillis Quigley, chose to abandon her singing career and started working in a brothel. Soon, she discovered how countless gentlemen would lavishly spend their money for her. So that's why, to fully establish her position as a red light district superstar, she started wearing jewelry and luxury dresses that cost around $5,000. And just like in this photo of her that was taken to promote her bordello, not as a brothel lady anymore, but instead a successful and established Old West madam. It showed her unique charm and timeless beauty, and in no time, her business even boomed more exponentially. She became very successful, and it was believed that she managed to own a house decorated with expensive velvet carpets, tapestries, and oriental decor. Indeed, she was a successful opera singer, but even more as a beauty of the Old West brothel. We've just discovered an amazing photo collection of beauties of the Old West. Now click this and discover the greatest madams of the Wild West.
Rarest Abraham Lincoln photos with shocking stories behind. Did you know that Lincoln was the first ever president of America who actually wore a beard? However, at the end of this video, you will see an alleged photo of him and discover more of the shocking whereabouts behind it. But first, let us show you these rare photos. It was believed to be the best ever photo of Lincoln. This was taken 8 days before his Gettysburg Address, where he said that all men were created equal. Experts believe that these rare photos preserve the charisma and deep expressive gaze of the great emancipator, one of the greatest leaders of America. But before his iconic beard and his campaign for the national stage, Lincoln was already a self-taught lawyer who had the nickname Honest Abe. This was believed to be the first photo of him taken after he first won a seat in the US Congress, representing the District of Illinois. However, despite being known for being relentless with his cause, Lincoln vowed to have the position for just one term. Indeed, Lincoln was the #1 enemy of slavery and even took the chance to choose it as the topic of the debate for the senatorial race. During that time, he made another legendary speech where he said that a house divided against itself cannot stand. After the debate, this photo captured how the unusually tall 6'4" Lincoln was heavily supported by the locals outside his home in Springfield, Illinois. Lincoln's fame was further established after his heated debate with Stephen Douglas, where they discussed critical issues faced by the nation during that time. Here's a photo of him without his iconic beard in that debate, although Douglas was the one elected as senator. On the other hand, Lincoln's reputation reached the nationwide spotlight, and which later on would lead him to his prestigious career as one of America's greatest presidents. Although Lincoln was eager to further his political career, he was indeed a family man who never forgot to cherish his time with his beloved wife, Mary Todd, and 4 sons.
Many of his lifelong friends cited that Lincoln was a father who never bothered working while tending and playing with his sons. Also, here's a fun fact. Did you know that his political rival Douglas once courted Mary Todd, but Lincoln won her heart? At that time, Lincoln became increasingly popular while having his nationwide political presence becoming more evident. However, life was not so kind to him and took his second son Eddie out of their embrace. Both Mary and Lincoln were devastated, for the young boy had died at only the age of 3.
Before continuing, we would really appreciate a like to this video. If you also want to see similar content in the future, consider subscribing and activating the notification bell.
With that, even as a father of the nation, Lincoln never forgot his responsibility to his youngest son Tad. He was busy with the ongoing Civil War, but he would always make time for Tad. His youngest son brought them salvation during their trying times when his other son, Willie, died. Abraham rejoiced in his youngest son, whom he observed as regularly as a tadpole. So, Abraham has called him Tad ever since. Lincoln was a doting and caring father. His secretaries from that time could never forget the kid who was the White House tyrant, as he would occasionally interrupt important meetings. You would be surprised what Lincoln did, since he never scolded Tad for doing so and instead hugged his son and brought him to his arms. Mentioning his secretaries, here's a photo of Lincoln with Nikolai and Hay. You would be surprised how close they were with him, since they were the people where almost everything we knew about Lincoln came from, and even published a 10-volume bibliography about him. Then, in this photo that Lincoln actually believed that made him the President of America. Well, of course, it was used in election, and it helped him to secure the position. Thanks to Brady, who captured this image before Lincoln delivered his game-changing Copper Union address in New York that made Lincoln secure the presidential position 3 months later. During his term, Lincoln was hands-on in assuring that the Union would get the upper hand in Civil War. So he often visits the military camps in person to address important issues on hand and make sure that their plans would not go astray. Like in this image, Lincoln visited the camp in Antietam, Maryland right after the battle. Next, Lincoln was with George McClellan at the Union's camp. In the first year of the Battle of Potomac, McClellan showed exceptional results in leading the Union forces, so he was promoted by Lincoln as General-in-Chief. However, the failure with this recent battle resulted in dissatisfaction, so Lincoln replaced him with another general. Then Lincoln with his trusted aide Allan Pinkerton with John McLeonard. It was believed that this person was behind the Union's intelligence and provided sensitive war information relayed by their spies throughout the Confederate side. He had also prevented Lincoln's assassination plot in Baltimore, as he had discovered it early. Just 5 years after his Copper Union speech, the president obviously looked more run down, since in those years, the US lost more than 500,000 soldiers in Civil War, which made Lincoln suffer from sleepless nights, and was so overworked that he even skipped meals. Many believe that these may have caused the president to look 20 years older in this photo. In the last picture of Lincoln alive, however, did you know that Lincoln actually grew his beard because an 11-year-old girl suggested it? Well, this photo was taken 4 days just before he was assassinated. It was believed that this was the best photo that had shown the president's expression of latent sadness, for he had experienced a rough life and lost his sons early. Despite that, it didn't stop him from enduring his hardships and led to the unification of the states after winning the Civil War. And then Lincoln's most controversial alleged deathbed picture. The entire nation was emotionally shaken and deeply shocked when the news of Lincoln's death was heard. However, an alleged photo of him was taken in secret and was given to his descendants in Illinois. In comparison with his last photo alive, experts said that his facial feature, like the slight scar on the lips, matched, and the injury sustained from the assassination was accurate. The image conjured emotions of fright and sadness. When the sad news reached his son Tad, he said, "Pa is dead. I can barely accept that I would never see him again." You discovered the amazing story about Abraham Lincoln. Also, did you know that under his term, the first transcontinental railroad was made? Click this and discover more about it.
The amazing story of Texas Rangers. Secrets. Strange facts. Curiosities. Known as the men who could not be stampeded in the Old West. Brace yourselves with these amazing facts and secrets of the famous Texas Rangers of the Old West. Here are some amazing secrets, strange facts, and dangerous encounters of the Texas Rangers with different outlaws during the Old West. The War with Mexico. Trailing Bonnie and Clyde. The American Civil War. During the Civil War, with thousands of Texans off fighting with the Confederate Army, frontier protection was afforded by a regiment of Rangers. They eventually became part of the Confederate Army. The Frontier Battalion. The Texas Rangers as Los Diablos Tejanos, or Texan Devils. To quell the violence, the Rangers implemented their own brand of lynch law against Mexicans and Tejanos. They executed at least 300 suspected Mexicans without any trial or conviction. Four facts you need to know about Texas Rangers. Number 1. Texas Rangers were initially part-time employees. Number 2. The first female Texas Ranger who became the highest ranking female Ranger in history. Number 3. They were one of the first organizations to carry revolvers. Number 4. Texas Rangers have always been multicultural. What do today's Rangers look like? Special weapons and tactics. SWAT. The Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit, EOD. The Ranger Reconnaissance Team. Special Response Teams, SRT. Crisis Negotiation Teams, CNT. Public Integrity Unit.
When we talk about the Old West, what always comes to mind are gunfights, outlaws, saloons, and gunfighters. In this video, we will get to know some of the famous gunslingers of the Old West that made it to our top list. The term gunslinger is a modern term often used in cinema or other media. To the end of the video, and let's see if your favorite made it to our list. William L. Buffalo Bill Brooks. Brooks was born in Ohio. He was an American soldier, a showman, and a buffalo hunter, hence the name Buffalo Bill. He was the producer of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. He was also a Pony Express rider at the beginning of the frontier. He was involved in 15 gunfights during this first month as town marshal in Dodge City. According to legend, Brooks went to Montana where he tried to become the city marshal, but because of Brooks' reputation, was instead passed over in favor of Morgan Arp. Several months later, Brooks with 2 other men were arrested for theft. Brooks was lynched while waiting trial on July 29, 1874. Henry Billy the Kid McCarty. Billy the Kid was born Henry McCarty in 1859, but is also known by the pseudonym William A. Fugitive. Billy the Kid returned to New Mexico after the murder of a blacksmith in Arizona to join a band of cattle. He was tried and convicted of Brady's murder and was sentenced to be hanged, but he later escaped and killing 2 deputies in the process. However, Sheriff Garrett was persistent on tracking the outlaw. Garrett shot and killed McCarty by then age 21 in Fort Sumner in July 14, 1881. He died at a young age but had already killed 8 men. Pat Garrett. He was an Old West American lawman, bartender, and customs agent who became famous for killing Billy the Kid. He was born on June 5, 1850 in Chambers County, Alabama. An orphan at 18 years old, Garrett headed west from Louisiana. He left Texas and migrated to New Mexico where he worked as a cowboy. Garrett was elected sheriff of Lincoln County, New Mexico. It was when his tracking and encounters of Billy the Kid started shortly after. Pat Garrett tracked the Kid down at Fort Sumner in 1880 after multiple misses and brought him to trial. Pat Garrett resumed track of the outlaw after Billy the Kid fled prison. but eventually killed Billy the Kid thereafter. Although his death was a bit controversial, he was also known to be a great sheriff. James Butler Wild Bill Hickok. He was known as a soldier, scout, lawman, gambler, showman, actor, and American Old West folk hero known for his participation in many prominent gunfights. Hickok was born and raised on a farm in northern Illinois. He was involved in several notable shootouts during the course of his life, including one involving David Tutt, where he killed Tutt with a single bullet 75 yards away. He was acquitted after claiming self-defense. Hickok was shot and killed while playing poker in 1876 by another gambler after a perceived insult. Hickok was holding a hand of cards at the time of his death and has become known as the dead man's hand. 2 pairs, black aces and eights. Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp was a lawman and a gambler in Arizona. He was a legend and the central figure of the Old West of the shootout at the OK Corral. Tombstone was the location and origin of Wyatt's legacy, but it was in Dodge City that Wyatt met his future allies, including Doc Holliday. A 5-month vicious and deadly conflict raged between outlaws known as the Cowboys Gang and the Earp brothers. A posse was created by Wyatt Earp and hunted down and killed the rest of the Cowboy Gang. Wyatt Earp was never injured in any of the gunfights. Earp died at his home in Los Angeles, possibly of chronic cystitis, on January 13, 1929, at age 80. Doc Holliday. He was born in Georgia and raised there. He became a dentist who established his career in Atlanta until he became a professional gambler and gunslinger out west. Holliday, like Earp, was a drifter and a risk-taker. He met Earp in Texas and the two became lifelong friends. Eventually, Holliday will accompany Earp to Tombstone, Arizona, and fight with him side by side at the OK Corral. At 36, Holliday died in Colorado of tuberculosis. Jesse James. Jesse James, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, was another celebrated bank and train robber who led the James Younger Gang along with his brother Frank. James achieved celebrity status and popularity beginning in 1866 by robbing banks, trains, and stagecoaches in the Midwest. James's life of crime ended after nearly 2 decades on the run when he was shot by new gang recruit Robert Ford, who had been promised by the authorities to be forgiven for past crimes if he killed James. We can never really tell if these men are classed as villains or not, but what we are sure of is that they were all fearless and larger than life. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to watch more video or click the following video recommendations.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel, and for today we are gonna show you vintage photos of women of the Old West. But before we start, I want you to take a look at this picture carefully. Do you know who this woman is? Well, find out at the end of this video. Now let's dive in. Laura Bullion. Laura began a relationship with outlaw and member of Wild Bunch, William Hughes Carver. Cynthia Ann Parker. She was only 10 when kidnapped by a Comanche and had 3 children with him. Texas Rangers discovered and relocated her at age 34. Sally Sampson, also known as Teacup Sally in her prostitution license. Famous Bordello. A private parlor of the 3rd most famous bordello in Lexington, Kentucky. Buffalo Calf Road Woman, also known as Brave Woman, Her rescue of her wounded brother helped rally the Cheyenne warriors to win the battle. UP Saloon. The UP Saloon is an establishment for men, but a family entrance is made on the eastern side, leading to a room where women were permitted. Kate Rockwell. She gained notoriety in her dance shows and got engaged more than 100 times and married at least 3 times. That seems pretty exhausting. Elizabeth Seaman. She was widely known for her record-breaking trip around the world in just 72 days. Dawson's Good Time Girls. These 6 prostitutes are posing for a photograph around 1900s. Dora Dufresne. She was only 15 when she promoted herself to Madam from a dance hall girl and began to operate a brothel in Dakota. Victoria Woodhull. She ran for President of the United States, but she was arrested for her so-called scandalous idea advocating free love. Belle Brezing. She only allowed men above a certain rank in the army to use her brothel and became so famous that when she died, she even received an obituary in Time magazine. John Powell Saloon. I keep seeing animals in the saloon. I wonder if pet owners have ever thought of letting them taste liquor. But please don't do that. Olive Oatman. 4 years with the Mohabs, she received her blue chin tattoo and was known as the first white woman to have a native tattoo on record. Susan Anderson. Known as Doc Susie for her dedication in medical practice for 47 years and didn't retire until she was 84. Pauline Cushman. She was considered one of the most successful Civil War spies. She was caught and sentenced to death, but delayed her hanging by faking an illness and was spared by Union troops. Pearl Hart. She is an outlaw of the American Old West and committed one of the last recorded stagecoach robberies in the U.S. She gained notoriety because of her gender. And as I mentioned earlier before starting this video, I'm gonna answer the question, do you know who this woman is? It's a must-watch video of Carrie Nation. She is an American activist and describes herself as a bulldog running along at the feet of Jesus. Barking at what he doesn't like, she promotes ordinance by destroying bars and discouraging women to wear corsets. We watched that brothels were quite frequent in the Old West. So, what do you think? Would you support the legalization of prostitution? Just leave your answers in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more of these, then please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell. See you around!